The Sonic the Hedgehog film is upon us. The road to get to that point was a long one, however, and included both changing distributors and, more famously, Sonic's design. In this video, we will explore that and everything else Sonic, as we explore the character's origins in video games, his stint in animation, and the long and troubled road to get to the big screen. For those who aren't familiar with video games, Sonic may mean nothing more to them than the name of a fast food restaurant. However, for many it was synonymous with video games and the SEGA Genesis or Mega Drive, which was the system's original international name. Unlike today, Nintendo ruled the home video game console market in the late 80s and very early 90s. With Mario as their mascot, the NES and Super NES had sold nearly 110 million units combined. From the late 80s, however, SEGA, a rival Japanese company, had started making some waves with the Master System and with the release of the Mega Drive, and were looking to seriously expand their market share worldwide. Along with celebrity-driven titles like Pat Riley's Basketball, Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, and Tommy Lasorda's Baseball, the company held a contest to design a mascot to directly compete with Nintendo's iconic Italian plumber Mario, and to replace their previous mascot Alex Kidd. Designer Naoto Oshima, creator of Sonic the Hedgehog, initially had a very different vision of the character, which almost ended up being human. Oshima said, "I created the first design proposal for Sonic after 3 years in the design department. Although it wasn't Sonic then, the main character was a human boy. I remember the idea struck me right as I was going to bed, and I was afraid that I wouldn't remember it in the morning. So I drew it quickly in the notebook and then fell asleep." Oshima recounts that initially SEGA wasn't too responsive to his ideas. "My pitch was that maps of action games were, at that time, always full of squares, everything at right angles. What if we could make a game where a character was running over smooth terrain, running in circles through loops and such?" So I presented my proposal to SEGA, and they told me that it probably could not be done, but that if anyone could program it, it would be Yuji Naka. They said that if I could get him on board, we could proceed with the project. Unfortunately, early concept art doesn't exist, as Oshima said that the pitch only consisted of a basic outline. The results of the company-wide contest, where some 200 entries were submitted, was that Oshima's design came out on top. However, this still wasn't the familiar blue hedgehog we know today. The original design was a white rabbit wearing a bow tie with long ears, and his name was Asobin. Oshima was then teamed with Yuji Naka, avid racing game fan and the premier game designer of his day, to work with Oshima on the new character. A pitch meeting with a plush toy of the new character impressed the SEGA executives, and the team was tasked with creating a game that would give the player a sensation of speed, similar to that of a fighter pilot breaking the sound barrier. However, they quickly ran into a problem. The character of Asobin was initially supposed to pick up objects with his long ears and throw them at on-screen enemies. This slowed down the gameplay as more controller mapping became necessary. That's when the idea of a rolling attack came into the picture, and Oshima reached back into his sketchbook for a drawing he had done with a character named Mr. Hadanzumi, or Mr. Needlemouse. The character was a blue hedgehog with quills on the back of his head and with long legs and pointy running shoes that could curl himself up into a ball and attack enemies by rolling at them. The name was changed from Mr. Hadanzumi to Supersonic, and then later simply to Sonic. White gloves were added to resemble Mickey Mouse, and his ears were pointed to give the impression that he would travel at high speeds. The character was colored dark blue to more closely match SEGA's logo. The new mascot and game were a go, but how successful he was going to be wasn't immediately obvious to everyone. Among the skeptics were SEGA of America CEO Michael Katz, who was not convinced that the new game or mascot would sell in the United States. Katz had overseen the launch of the Mega Drive in the US, where it had to be renamed Genesis for copyright reasons. But despite being the technically superior console at the time, SEGA were still struggling to gain market share against Nintendo and their Nintendo Family Entertainment System in the United States. Under Katz's tenure, the Genesis had only sold 500,000 units in the US, which would contribute to former Mattel CEO Tom Kalinske being appointed to replace him as CEO of SEGA of America. Kalinske had previously revived both the Barbie and Hot Wheels toy lines, and while he knew very little about video games, he recognized instantly the kind of appeal a character like Sonic could have with the appropriate marketing push. To brand SEGA with Sonic as something cooler, hipper, and with the times, Kalinske wanted to replace Altered Beast as the bundled title with Sonic the Hedgehog. The mere idea of this gave SEGA of Japan a fit, as they wanted customers to buy the console and then buy the game separately, earning more money in the process. But Kalinske convinced them the short-term loss in direct Sonic revenue would be more than made up for by an increased SEGA market share. The gamble worked, and SEGA had gained 65% of the market share from Nintendo. Sonic the Hedgehog went on to sell over 15 million copies and established the character as a pop culture icon. Sega's Sonic team began work immediately on a sequel in November of 1991. However, they would have to do it without designer Yuji Naka, who quit the company after a dispute in regards to Sega's corporate policy, but was still working with the Sonic team. American and Sega Technical Institute founder Mark Cerny was hired at a considerable salary and with more creative freedom to work on Sonic 2. Naka would move to the US to work on the sequel. Where the first game was a side-scrolling adventure, the second game would up the ante. Based on a previous level that Naka had designed, team member Tim Skelly designed a series of what were described as pseudo-3D levels using pre-rendered polygons, a technique that wasn't widely used in console gaming at the time. The game also introduced a new character, Sonic's friend, Tails. Released in November of 1992, the game was a critical and financial success, selling over 6 million copies. It is widely considered the best Sonic game, as well as one of the best games in the entire Sega Genesis library. Development on Sonic 3 would begin in January of 1993. The development team that made Sonic 2 would now be split into two teams. One American, who would work on the spin-off game Sonic Spinball, and a Japanese team, who would work on Sonic 3. Time would be of the essence. A deadline of February 1994 was imposed by Sega, as they had signed a rather lucrative promotional deal with fast food giant McDonald's. The game would also feature a new character, Knuckles of Agnida. While the Sonic team continued to push the technical boundaries of the Genesis, Sega would attempt to up their game, so to speak, in other ways. Singer Michael Jackson, who was himself a fan of the series, contacted Sega about composing music for Sonic 3. Sega already had a working relationship with Jackson, having released the game Moonwalker a few years earlier. Sega executive Roger Hector confirmed that Jackson had a meeting at the Sega offices and was provided with a demo of the game. While Jackson was working on the game, charges of sexual impropriety emerged in the media. There were conflicting reports that it was the unwanted media attention that would follow that led Sega to removing his name from the game's final credits. According to friends and family members, he wanted to remain anonymous for Sonic 3. He did it just because he was a fan and wanted to go uncredited like he did for Do the Bartman because he thought Bart deserved a #1 hit. Hector hired Howard Drawson to come in and rework the game's music before the game was completed. It has also been suggested that Jackson himself was dissatisfied with the work and wouldn't allow his name to be associated with the game unless the final result was to his liking. Due to both the deadline and storage space limitations, Sonic 3 was not completed on time, not in its original form anyway. The game was essentially cut in two, with the other half being released later as Sonic and Knuckles. It could be played separately, but came on a lock-on cartridge that was intended to be paired with Sonic 3. The two games combined represented the original vision for Sonic 3. Sonic 3 would go on to sell over 1 million copies in the US and is also considered among the best games in the Genesis library. Despite the Sonic games that came later on other systems, arguably they never reached the same level of either quality or popularity as the original Sonic trilogy. Sonic had become an institution in his own right. As such, Hollywood eventually showed an interest. Network TV, however, beat them to the punch. Sonic the Hedgehog's first appearance on television was in 1993 with the syndicated series The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, produced in association with DIC Animation City, Sega of America, Boba Entertainment, Retel Italia, and the Spanish network Telecinco. The series ran for 65 episodes following Sonic and his friend Tails as they squared off against his antagonist, Dr. Robotnik. The series, which starred Family Matters star Jaleel White as Sonic, was met with a mixed reception and was cancelled only after 1 season. It did, however, inspire a spin-off video game in the aforementioned Sonic Spinball, as well as a comic book from publisher Archie Comics. A second series titled Sonic the Hedgehog was produced once again by DIC, Sega of America, and Retel Italia in association with Telecinco, and ran for 2 seasons on ABC television in the United States on Saturday morning. Taking place on the planet Mobius, the series followed Sonic, Tails, and the Knothole Freedom Fighters as they battled the evil Dr. Julian Robotnik, who had launched a coup against the Kingdom of Acorn. The series ended on a cliffhanger, however it was cancelled but not before garnering a cult-like following. Sonic Underground, the third series featuring Sonic, was produced by DIC International and Les Studios Tex Sarl, and was first broadcast in France in January of 1999 and ran for 40 episodes. The series was intended to promote the Sega Dreamcast system and featured Jaleel White once again reprising his role as Sonic. Once again, Dr. Robotnik would seize control of a planet, and Sonic and his friends would battle him to free it. Only this time, they used medallions emblazoned with musical instruments to help them in their struggles. By 2004, Sega was out of the console hardware business. However, they continued to produce Sonic media in cooperation with their partners. A fourth anime-inspired series, Sonic X, produced by TMS Entertainment, Sonic Team, and SEGA, ran for 2 years with a total of 76 episodes in Japan on TV Tokyo. The series was aired internationally, with 26 episodes being aired in the US, Canada, the Middle East, and the UK. This time Sonic, rescued by a young human boy after being sent to Earth, where they had to save a friend from Dr. Eggman Robotnik. The series in the United States was distributed by 4Kids Entertainment. In 2014, Cartoon Network and Boomerang, along with SEGA, Le Gardeur Thématiques, Jeunesse TV, and Technicolor TV Productions, produced the computer animated series Sonic Boom for the aforementioned cable network. The series was also a tie-in to 3 video games, a toy line by Tomy, and a comic from Archie Comics. A total of 104 episodes were made, albeit each with a shortened running time of only 11 minutes. The reception for the show was mostly positive. While the series was never formally canceled, it was placed on hiatus. In 2018, the original creative team left the series to pursue work elsewhere, leaving Sonic Boom in a state of limbo. Limbo, incidentally, a state Sonic often found himself in on his way to the big screen as well. The first attempt to bring Sonic the Hedgehog to the big screen was back in 1994. The film Sonic Wonders of the World was a planned 3D CGI hybrid co-production of MGM, Trilogy Entertainment, and SEGA. The plot involved a 12-year-old boy named Josh Pinsky. After turning in an incomplete school paper and distraught by his parents' divorce, he boots up his father's experimental computer. His father just so happens to be a computer scientist. He asks the computer to write a paper on a test pilot named Sonic. When the computer doesn't understand, Josh shows the computer a Sega Saturn game, Sonic Extreme, a game which incidentally Sega never released. Thanks to the computer, Sonic the Hedgehog then discovers he has free will. A glitch in the game brings Sonic out of the game world and into ours. Dr. Robotnik also escapes from the game and embarks on world conquest. The film began development in 1993 and was written by the Vagrant and eventual Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer screenwriter Richard Jeffries. However, before the film could be greenlit, MGM backed out of the development deal. An attempted revival at DreamWorks fell short. It's unclear as to why, however, creative differences and the decline in the 16-bit console market may have contributed to their decision. Sonic Armageddon began originally as a movie pitch by the late Sonic the Hedgehog animated series writer Ben Hurst as a continuation of the animated series. However, it was after a power struggle between Hurst and comic book creator Ken Penders, who allegedly sabotaged Hurst's pitch, that Penders made a pitch of his own to SEGA in 2007. Penders drew 4 pieces of concept art and even made a proof of concept video to complete his pitch. Not much is known about the plot of Sonic Armageddon. However, according to Penders' own Twitter feed, due to SEGA licensing manager Robert Leffler's cancer diagnosis and his subsequent passing, a strategy meeting never took place and the project never advanced. Many years later, however, development would pick up again on what would eventually become the movie now in theaters. In 2013, during the reign of Amy Pascal, Sony Pictures Entertainment had acquired the movie rights to Sonic the Hedgehog. In June of 2014, Sony, along with Marza Animation Planet, announced that they were teaming up to make a CGI live-action hybrid film featuring Sonic the Hedgehog. After 2 years of development, in February of 2016, a release date of 2018 was announced. The film was originally to be produced by Neil Moritz, who had previously produced I Know What You Did Last Summer and The Fast and the Furious, and written by Fistfight writers Evan Susser and Van Robichaud. Deadpool director Tim Miller and visual effects artist Jeff Fowler, both of whom worked for Blur Studios, would develop the film, with Fowler eventually taking up directorial duties. By this time, however, Tom Rothman was running the show, and he was not sold on the vision. As such, Sony passed on it and put the project into turnaround, so the production team could take the movie with them and set up shop elsewhere. Paramount would pick up the baton, and Sonic was on track again to hit theaters with most of the production team retained. On May 30th, 2018, it was reported that X-Men's James Marsden was cast in the Sonic movie in a role first described as an authority figure. The role was later to be revealed as police officer Tom Wachowski. On June 7th, 2018, Final Space and Ride-Along's Tika Sumpter was announced as part of the cast, with the film having a target release date of November 19th, 2019. On July 1st, 2018, actor Jim Carrey was announced to be portraying the film's villain, Dr. Robotnik. In late April of 2019, the first trailer for Sonic the Hedgehog hit the internet. Fans did not take to the revised character design and Sonic's teeth, which many thought were creepy and disturbing. Faced with what may be a certain bomb due to fan backlash, director Jeff Fowler took to Twitter and reassured fans that the film would be delayed until they could get the character design right. A new release date would soon follow. The entertainment media and even studio marketing departments are quick to label fans as toxic. How appropriate that is debatable, but it is true that up until this point, many in the fan community were perplexed at the decision to make a Sonic the Hedgehog movie at all, especially when SEGA has so many other more cinematic properties to mine. Given that a Sonic movie was made, many fans were also critical of the idea of placing him in our world in the first place, and Sonic's design was widely mocked and ridiculed. Fowler's tweet, however, changed everything. Fowler and the production team behind Sonic listened to fans' genuine grievances, took them seriously, and took action. This instantly changed how fans viewed the production. Even many of the most critical fans were won over and now rooting for the movie. On November 12, 2019, a new trailer was released. The result was a newly redesigned Sonic the Hedgehog, which was more in line with the way he resembled in video games and animation, as per fan requests. The added delay seemed to pay off for Paramount. On January 27, 2020, Bounding Into Comics reported that box office projections for Sonic the Hedgehog had increased by 27%. Whether Sonic the Hedgehog succeeds or fails, it marks a turning point for Hollywood and the movie industry. In an age where studios, directors, and actors all too often mockingly cast aside the concerns of fans and actively mock them and attack them, director Jeff Fowler and Paramount have decided to take a different approach. They listened. An example set for others to follow. Let us know if you're excited for Sonic the Hedgehog in the comments below.